The advantages of the Accu-Chek Bolus Advisor. The Accu-Chek Bolus Advisor provides a bolus recommendation aiming at correcting elevated blood glucose levels to the middle of the target range. Bolus calculation with the Accu-Chek Bolus Advisor can help to reduce postprandial hyperglycemia without increasing the frequency of hypoglycemic events. Other bolus calculators regard both glucose-centric and meal-centric insulin as active insulin. The Accu-Chek Bolus Advisor distinguishes between glucose-centric and meal-centric insulin. This is because meal-centric insulin has no blood glucose lowering effect. It is only covering the carbohydrate consumption. As a result, only the glucose-centric insulin is factored into the active insulin. The Accu-Chek Bolus Advisor is the only one that takes both meal rise and insulin offset time into account, along with the acting time of the insulin. Elevated blood glucose after meals is tolerated as part of the physiological rise in blood glucose levels in response to carbohydrate consumption. This meal rise is added to the current blood glucose value. These elevated levels are tolerated until the offset time of the insulin ends, at which time it is expected that the insulin begins significantly lowering glucose levels. Together, the parameters of blood glucose, meal rise, offset time, and acting time form an area of blood glucose values that can be customized in line with a patient's personal needs. Blood glucose values inside this area are not corrected in order to avoid over-delivery of insulin. A slightly elevated blood glucose value measured after 2 hours, for example, is not corrected as long as the reading was within the allowed blood glucose area. Although outside the target range, the blood glucose reading still falls within the area of allowed blood glucose values and does not trigger a correction recommendation. However, when the measured value is so high that it falls outside the area of allowed blood glucose values, thanks to its method of active insulin calculation, the Accu-Chek Bolus Advisor recommends a correction bolus, but only up to the next acceptable blood glucose value, which is at the upper limit of the area of allowed blood glucose values. A second adjoining area is then created to cover the effects of this correction dose. The Accu-Chek Bolus Advisor offers the following advantages: clever active insulin calculation to help avoid postprandial hyperglycemia, and allowance for the current physiological status using an area of allowed blood glucose values which can be adjusted to the patient's needs.